Good day, ENG2D. Let's carry on here with our study of both the major characters and the minor characters. Again, this is designed to just give an overview, a review of everything that we've studied up until this point. So again, here, the major characters, they drive and shape the development of the plot, as opposed to minor characters that provide commentary on the plot. So these guys drive the action of the plot. Without them, significant things would be different. So again, our scene here is Scotland, England. Again, their actions create the broad narrative of the play, the overall message and details of the plot. We're going to start here with Duncan, who is the King of Scotland. He is generally regarded as a good, fair man who ruled well. Macduff says about him, he is a most sainted king. So very gracious, full of gratitude to the generals, and, was going to make them full of growing, give them much reward for how well they did in the war. His greatest flaw, again, his fatal flaw, sometimes called or hamartia, some people pronounce this hamartia, his willingness to trust those around him, right? He's too trusting. He is too trusting, and this leads directly to his downfall. Again, remember, this fatal flaw is some flaw in their character. However, some people believe that it's not, a flaw in their character so much as it's just a bad decision that the character makes. I personally like this idea of somebody having a fatal flaw. Right. Let's move right into the generals in the army here. Firstly, let's take a look at Macbeth. We know that both Macbeth and Banquo are generals in the king's army. And in addition to that, they are friends and quite possibly best friends. Introduced by minor characters. So we have the witches that introduce Macbeth by suggesting, something wicked this way comes. And then, of course, the captain that talks about how brave and courageous Macbeth acted on the battlefield. Now, these two comments form an image of an idealized hero, a brave man, warrior of action. Now again, remember, we must have this high standing. We must have the protagonist, the tragic hero protagonist, be of an elevated position, right? So this establishes that Macbeth definitely is of this elevated, higher position, right? Macbeth's first words, "So fair and foul a day I have not seen." Now again, this is an echo of the words of the witches, right? And it's important to note that it means that there is now a direct link between Macbeth and the forces of evil, the witches, right? So in other words, Macbeth is now under their control because he's reiterating their ideas, their words. Now, initially, he seemed to be a very reasonable man, yet after the witch's prophecy, King Hereafter, it does encourage a transformation in him. Now, some critics say the witches alone created this transformation. Others suggest that he was flawed from the beginning. He had some ambition right from the beginning that, was unchecked. Regardless, he is a tragic hero, according to the definition that we took a look at earlier. His fatal flaw, or hamartia, of course, is his ambition. And not just ambition, overreaching, vaulting ambition is the quote. So this vaulting ambition leads to his downfall. And again, he starts very high, for elevated position here, and sinks down because, of course, of this fatal flaw, this hamartia. So again, vaulting ambition leads to his downfall. It allows him to become an agent of evil. The argument goes that if he did not have this initial ambition, the witches would not be able to have any power over him. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we take a look at the minor characters, the witches. And it suggests the same thing, that he did have this fatal flaw right from the beginning. Now, of course, the irony of that is that he presents right at the beginning as a man, that has this physical stature, like idealized hero, so brave, and so courageous and so capable, right? But he lacks emotional and moral strength, right? And again, this is connected to his fatal flaw, his ambition. Yeah, he wants to reach above his natural position in life. All right, let's take a look here at Banquo, the other general in the king's army. Banquo and Macbeth, we're going to just make that a little bigger. Banquo and Macbeth are closely linked characters. They have the same rank at the beginning. They're both generals. They're both courageous, loyal warriors. They both witness the witches' prophecies in which future success is foretold for both of them. Yet, their reactions to them are quite different. Although they are both influenced by their ambition, and you could even argue that Banquo's ambition leads him to his downfall in some ways as well. Yet their reactions are quite different. Macbeth starts thinking about killing the king right off the hop, right? Whereas, of course, Banquo, just wants to forget about it. Kind of, he's filled with a lot of doubt about whether these witches are telling the truth or not. Where, of course, Macbeth believes them, right? Banquo here is a man of integrity and honor, and he resists the evil temptation of the prophecies at first, although later on he too is influenced by his own ambition. He senses that the words may be deceitful. In fact, he says, sometimes to win us to their harms, the instruments of darkness tell us little truths. Right? And that, of course, is the process of equivocation, telling half-truths, which is exactly what these witches are doing, right? If we do choose to criticize Banquo, we look to his inaction. He suspects Macbeth was involved in Duncan's death, yet takes no action. He, too, is ambitious, right? And so, as I suggested earlier, Macbeth suffers a little bit later on for his ambition as well. Perhaps he will father a line of kings, and this ambition leads him to not take action when he should have against Macbeth. He should have taken action against him right the instant he started to wonder whether Macbeth killed the king illegitimately, right? His inaction at this point results in his death. He is too strong a rival to be left alive, according to Macbeth, right? Again, we see him linked to Macbeth. Both are tragic characters doomed by flaws within themselves. Yeah, and interesting to note that they have so many parallels, yet Banquo here is a man of integrity and tries very hard to stick by that, although his ambition leads him to this inaction that leads to his downfall, right? So again, we see flawed people here that have both some good and evil, whereas Banquo has more in integrity, for sure, and honor than in the end Macbeth shows to have. All right, let's take a look here at Lady Macbeth. Now, she is a complex character, and more so than her husband. She, at first, is touched by evil and actions guided by it, yet does not personify evil totally. Whereas at the end, we see here that Macbeth does. He transforms into a heartless monster. She never fully does, right? She's influenced by it, but she doesn't quite go over the edge there. Now, she too is ambitious. She must succeed by helping her husband triumph. because of course women at the time were not allowed to have this kind of ambition for themselves, right? Although it seems that she has some ambition in becoming queen, right? But mostly it's about helping her husband triumph, and then, secondarily, having her benefit from the position as well. Now, this is interesting that she very clearly, from our point of view, is likely suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Symptoms include egocentric behavior, self-centeredness, sleep disturbances, and they both have these, right? Certainly egocentric or self-centered ambition here, they definitely both have this. Now, it's important to note that they've both just lost a child very recently. Lady Macbeth speaks about, cutting off her milk. So the recent death of the child is so recent that her milk is still flowing, right? And she refers to this milk flowing a couple times. So losing a child, it tells us exactly how the child died, but it's possible that the child maybe died in some traumatic way. Losing a child is traumatic enough, right? So you never know, maybe they are both suffering from this, and this, it often results in egocentric, self-centered behavior, narcissistic behavior. Sleep disturbances, as we said, nightmares, reliving certain situations, emotional detachment, and they both have that to a certain extent. Although, of course, Lady Macbeth here is not ever to quite give it up, right? Give up those emotions. She still has lingering guilt and, fueled by her conscience. Whereas Macbeth, he is so far deep in guilt that he admits he'd likely never come out, because he's so guilty. He's so full of guilt. Okay, and that often leads to emotional detachment, anxiety for sure, worry about things, irritability. We see a lot of that in Macbeth. We see it in her as well, and social withdrawal. We see this particularly in her in the end, as by the end we see that both of them are sleeping separately. So she is definitely sleeping in her own queen's chamber, as Macbeth is sleeping in his king's chamber. There's definitely a rift between the two of them. Things have definitely changed. Their marriage has, definitely become less close. Social withdrawal. So yeah, we see that in her behavior at the end, when she is just alone in her chamber, trying to wash the guilt, trying to wash all the blood off of her hands. Again, we in our age would refer to that as a flashback. Emotionally damaged, not adjusted to the loss of the child, right? So we did mention that before. Rather than being an agent of evil, she could be experiencing a serious mental illness, as the doctor at the end suggests, right? At this time, certainly during the medieval ages, there was no talk about emotional illnesses or mental illness. That was something that somebody had to contend with themselves. The doctor was just there to aid in physical healing. All right, now the next character that plays a major role, right? Again, remember, the major characters drive and shape the development of the plot. They play major roles in the development of the story. All right, Macduff, Thane of Fife. He is a loyal follower of Duncan, is featured little though in the beginning, the first half of the play, yet comes to life in the second. The main reason for this is that he, like Banquo, serves as a foil to Macbeth. So let's get into what a foil does. Where Macbeth is base, like self-serving, dishonorable, we see that these other men are the opposite. So a foil is somebody that shows the opposite characteristics. Macduff is loyal, noble, and worthy. His goodness contrasts the evil that has poisoned Macbeth. So the foil character serves as a contrast to another character. So we see how truly evil Macbeth is by taking a look at how good and loyal and noble-worthy another character, Macduff, is. He escapes and joins the English king, who is Edward the Confessor. And again, Edward the Confessor said to have healing qualities. So the fact that Macduff goes to England to this healing king is quite significant, because it, of course, suggests that this healing king has the ability to heal the disease that is Macbeth in Scotland. And he raises an army for invasion. He is, of course, as we know, born by cesarean section likely. And so the argument is that technically he's not physically born through a birth canal. And so he avenges the loss of his family and slays Macbeth, and restores, in so doing, restores the natural order of Scotland, right? And says, the time is free. Peace is upon us. Balance after excess, right? Restores the excess. And we see definitely a sense of balance here. Calm after conflict. And what this all means, of course, is that we have new hope for Scotland as that chain of being has been restored to the proper order. We see a natural king on the throne. Okay, so some other characters here, other than Macduff, all minor characters. So Macduff, his son, Lady Macduff, Lennox, Ross, Menteith, Angus, Caithness, the English forces, Seward, a general in the English army, of course, equal to the rank of Macbeth and Banquo. He has a young son. We'll talk a little bit about this idea of his son and messages coming through the play about sons, or themes about these things. There's an English doctor, also a Scottish doctor, a sergeant, porter, old man. Sometimes this is interpreted as being the father of I think, Ross. Lords, gentlemen, officers, soldiers, murderers, attendants, and messengers. We also have Hecate and the three witches, who serve as actual incarnations of evil, and some ghosts, some apparitions. All right, let's take a look here at, minor characters on the back. So again, Macbeth, minor characters. As I suggested before, the minor characters in a Shakespearean tragedy serve as commentators upon the action, and they comment also on the behavior of the main characters. They do not directly drive the plot or the storyline. So they either comment on the action or the behavior of certain characters. Let's speak firstly about Malcolm. Now, we know that Malcolm and Donalbain are brothers. Malcolm, being the eldest, was pronounced Prince of Cumberland, meaning he is the heir to the throne. So again, we have here the eldest son of Duncan. He flees to England. Of course, this gives Macbeth an argument for to support the fact that Malcolm and Donalbain killed their father. Right? It is, of course, appearance versus reality. They did not kill their father, but they're fleeing, they're leaving the situation so quickly does make them look like they might be guilty. Macbeth claims that this shows he and his brother were responsible, yet in reality, both sons merely feared that the same fate would befall them, right? So again, appearance versus reality. Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Again, the witches pronounced that right at the very beginning. Introduced that very, very important theme. Like Macduff, Malcolm finds his way to the court of Edward the Confessor, or this healing king in England. Here he tests Macduff's loyalty by pretending to be evil himself. And this is an important point because, of course, it proves that he is not going to be too trusting like his father was. It suggests that he is going to have balance He's going to be, trusting when he must be, when it's appropriate, and not trusting when it's not reasonable. So he tests Macduff's loyalty by pretending to be evil himself. Macduff's shocked reaction, though, in the end, convinces Malcolm that he can be trusted. And so at this point, of course, he tells Macduff what's going on. That, he's put an army together along with the aid of Edward the Confessor. Malcolm becomes king on Macbeth's death at the end of the play. In many ways, it is like his father. He is a good, honorable, fair man. So this is established. He is good, he is honorable, he is fair, he is strategic, he's brave, he's willing to do what needs to be done. He has the advantage of being astute as well. So astute meaning he is sharp, is strategically sharp, as his testing of Macduff shows. So in the end, and we do speak about this at the end of the video lessons, that a successful reign beckons. Is he going to be a good king? He certainly proves that, yes, he is. He is going to bring balance to Scotland, and he himself has shown himself to contain that balance in his character. Let's take a look at Donalbain, his brother. Again, these are both sons of Duncan. The younger of Duncan's sons, he flees to Ireland when his father is murdered, and we do not see him again in the play. But this is, of course, quite important, because at some point he will be welcomed back, right? Lady Macduff. She symbolizes all the innocent people slain by Macbeth in his quest for power. So both she and her son do, right? She dies because she is in the wrong place at the wrong time, not because she stands in Macbeth's way. So here we see that he has sunken to a new low. So again, this is, of course, his third great crime. So the three great crimes of Macbeth, the first, of course, is killing Duncan. The second great crime is killing Banquo, his very good friend. And then, of course, the third great crime, where he sinks to an absolute new low and establishes that he is now a complete monster. He has removed himself from all feeling and emotion and has just completely sunken to this new low. She is a good wife to Macduff, being upset by his departure without believing him to be a real traitor. She toys around with it, but of course she doesn't really believe it. When her murderers arrive, her main concern is still that her husband is safe. So again, some suggestions about what, this medieval or Elizabethan woman, what kind of roles they should play, or they do play at this time. Fleance is Banquo's son that escapes. Like Lady Macduff, he too is an innocent victim of Macbeth's evil regime. Whilst Banquo, his father, is murdered, he manages to slip away. This has been ordained earlier by the witch's prophecy that Banquo will father a line of kings. We don't, however, learn how. We know that Malcolm is going to welcome people that have fled the country back into Scotland, and of course, Fleance would be one of them. There are some stories that suggest Fleance didn't come back to Scotland, that he stayed and married a princess, and then eventually came back to Scotland, and that yes, the line of kings that King James came from was indeed directly linked, apparently, with Fleance, as I think the Stuart line ends up making its way back to Scotland. All right, the porter. The porter is the keeper of Macbeth's castle. However, he imagines he is also the keeper of Hell's entrance, which is not too far off, right? Symbolically speaking, for sure. As well as providing comic relief, he contributes on a serious level. So this comic relief, of course, is, this is actually the only place in this play where there is any comic relief. And some of it, of course, is through the use of body humor, like sexual innuendo, right? Called body humor. The Elizabethans, of course, would find this very, very humorous. In his game of Hellgate, he describes 3 figures waiting to be admitted into hell. Now, the point that is pretty poignant here is that all, like Macbeth, have overreached themselves. So the people waiting to go to hell are parallel to Macbeth and his actions. So firstly, there's a greedy farmer, there's a tailor who steals, and then an equivocator who lies his way into heaven. Now, he certainly is making a surreptitious and ironic comment on Macbeth's character, right? That, yes, these people have gone to hell because they've overreached themselves in some way. And that's exactly what Macbeth is doing. All right. The Thanes, Ross, Angus, Menteith, Lennox, and Caithness. This group represents the political structure of Scotland at the time. Their role in the play is generally to comment upon the changing fortunes of both themselves and of the country. And again, this is the result, as we know, of the disruption in the chain of being, right? And we know that the Elizabethans believed this chain of being to be an unmovable truth in the world, that kings were ordained by God to be at the top of the chain and that everything else followed below. Because this chain of being was disrupted, everything started changing. Their fortunes and many details in the country, right? So they make a lot of comments on how things are changing. Ross is Macduff's cousin, and he unfortunately has the unenviable task of being a perpetual messenger. For example, he brings news of the battle to Duncan. He informs Macbeth of his new title and tells of Macduff's flight. He also tells of the death of Macduff's family, unenviable for sure, and the death of young Seward. So he plays as a messenger. Again, though, commenting on how things have changed. Lots of change in the country. Lennox is largely an observer. He makes a few pithy, fearful comments on the fate of Scotland. So again, making comments on how things are changing for the worse in Scotland. Now the witches, again, we said they were the incarnation of evil in the play. They symbolize evil. So the 3 witches are the physical incarnation of evil in the play. They are not able to control Macbeth like a voodoo doll, but rather fuel his boundless ambition. And we said that this ambition, again, is his fatal flaw, Macbeth's fatal flaw, his hamartia. And because this ambition existed before to some extent, the witches are able to manipulate him. So they fuel his boundless ambition and so lead him into evil acts. Faced with a virtuous, noble person, however, they would have no power. But when they encounter a morally flawed character like Macbeth, they are able to undermine the very fabric of society. So they're able to influence him or manipulate him only because this fatal flaw existed in him previously. Witchcraft was a favorite subject of James I. Now, when Elizabeth died in 1603, James I, the King of Scotland, James VI of Scotland became James I of England and was Shakespeare's new patron and king. So Shakespeare very much wanted to please King James. And he knew it was shrewd, it was smart, strategic even, enough to understand that including the king's pet subject, one of his favorite subjects was witchcraft. He even wrote a book on it, I think called Demonology. The king's pet subject in Macbeth would aid the play's success. So not just the play's success, but Shakespeare's success. And did it work? It sure did. Yeah, very soon after James actually came into England, he announced that Shakespeare and his company of actors would now be working under his patronage, and they were now called the King's Men. All right, so that is a pretty darn good overview of both minor and major characters in Macbeth.